Good morning. My name is Eva Raines. I am a docent here at the Fernland Historical Park. As many of you know, the Montgomery County Memorial Library System has a summer reading program. They have programs for the young children, the young adults, the adults, and because of COVID, they're not able to have the events inside the library like we've done in past years. We're going to start here at the Arnold-Simonton House, and I'll give you more information as we get inside. But as you can see, the state plaque right here will state that it was in a different location, and that is true. And again, when we get inside where we can hear better, I'll tell you why and when it was moved over here. So if it's all right with y'all, I'm going to remove my mask and I will try to stay far away from you. So let's go inside. Well, here we are on the porch of this colonial style home, and if you will notice up here is this molding is called dental molding. It was a characteristic of how houses were built in the North, because Dr. Arnold, who had this house built in 1845, was from Connecticut. We figured that he got to Texas as soon as he could because it was a lot warmer here. You'll notice things inside as well that were characteristic of building houses in the North. So let's go in. Well, welcome to the Arnold-Simonton House. Dr. Arnold, like I said, moved to Texas. He built this house. It was considered a wealthy man's house due to the fact that the ceilings are as high as they are, 12 feet, I believe. And as we all know, heat rises and it would have been cooler down here. This is what is called a dog trot. And dog trot means they would have opened the two doors that way, the two doors there. The breeze would have gone through during the hot times of the summer. And as we all know how hot it is almost all year long in Texas, they would have moved their dining table out here and taken their meals. The younger children would have brought their mattresses out here at nighttime and slept just because it was cooler. And when we get into both of these rooms, you'll notice that the fireplace is in the center of the room, which is a characteristic of how the houses were built in the North. And again, he was from Connecticut. You'll notice when we get out on the grounds that the other three structures, the fireplaces, the chimneys, are all on the outside wall of the houses. You're standing on the original floors, white pine, original walls, a big testament to their building skills. Now, before we go into one of the rooms, I'd like to introduce May and Carol Tharp. They got it all started. They were from Montgomery. They were both historians. They loved old houses. He was an architect by profession. And when they saw an old house for sale, they would go and look at it, and they liked it. Of course, they purchased it. And they owned some land. For those of you who are from Montgomery, you know that the old Honey Egypt Road, before they put that thoroughfare in called Fish Creek thoroughfare, but the old snaky, windy road, Honey Egypt, is still there, and their property was off of that road, and it was called Fernland, mainly because of all the green fern and kind of marshy out there, and they would bring their houses and put them out there. They also had Sam Houston's hunting lodge, and they would live in all the houses, stay in one for a while, move to the next one. And some of them they modernized just a little bit, which you'll see when we get to the Hulon house. But as these folks started to get older, they thought, what are we going to do with these houses when we pass away? And they made a contract, an agreement with Sam Houston University in Huntsville to take the houses when they passed on. Well, they did pass on. We had Hurricane Ike. It didn't damage the houses to the fact that, they were destroyed, but they did enough repair work on them that they knew they were going to have to get them out of that area. Sam Houston University took Sam Houston's hunting lodge, and it's on the grounds there in Huntsville. Then an agreement was made with the city of Montgomery to bring the other houses over here. This land was donated, and then they started building the pads to put the other houses. Now this house, the Arnold-Simonton House, that's two different families, and they lived in this house, the original families lived in this house until the early 1970s. And then one of the Simontons gave the house to the Montgomery Historical Society for the upkeep for duration. Now, it was located over by the old post office off of Houston Street in Montgomery, but when it was decided to make this historical park, the house was moved over here, built in 1845, and I think it's a great testament to the building skills of the men that built this house. So with that history being told, let's move into this room right here. Well, here we are in what we are showing as a bedroom. In the original plans and reading about the house when it was originally built, this would have been the dining room, but we needed to show a bedroom in the house. This bed, well, let me back up. Sam Houston was very liked by the residents of Montgomery, and he liked the city of Montgomery, and he came frequently. And when he did, he stayed at various places. And one of the places he stayed was the Magnolia House, and upstairs in this room, this bed was located in that room. He liked this bed. And when the private residents that have this house now purchased the house, they were getting rid of some of the original furniture, and one of the pieces was this bed. It was purchased by a local resident and donated to the society. So we have it in here to show this was where he slept at the Magnolia House. And have you ever heard the expression, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite? Do you know how that originated? Well, I'm going to tell you. You see this rope. It could have been around a bale of hay or cotton. It was cut to be able to use the cotton or the hay, and then it was just left thrown down on the floor in the barn. Well, it was time. They didn't have box springs, but it was time to get the new box springs put on this bed, and they had a tool that they would use, wrap the rope around these hinges right here. They would tighten it up as tight as they could, so hence, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. Because the mattress that would have been put on here was stuffed either with corn shucks or chicken feathers, whatever they had. And eventually, the little bugs that had crawled into the rope were crawling out, getting in the mattress, then getting on the person sleeping in the bed, and of course, they had to scratch. And that's how that expression came along. When I'm doing a first-person program for the 4th grade students, which they are introduced to Texas history in the 4th grade. And I'll have a bunch of, let's see, they would have been about 8 years old, maybe 9 years old. I will ask one of them, well, do you have a chore you have to do at your house? Oh, yes, I have to clean my room or empty the dishwasher or take out the trash or something like that. And I said, I'll ask, do you have a bathroom in your bedroom? No, I have to use the one down the hallway. I have to share it with my brother. And then I will ask, well, what if you lived in this house in 1861? Where would you go to the restroom in this house? And of course, they're looking all around trying to find something, and they can't. And I will tell them, and I'll remind them that this was a rich man's house. And I said, look at this fine chair. Leather seat. You could sit in it. And then I raise it, and I show them the porcelain chamber pot. And of course, they're all going, ew, who cleans that out? And I said, well, it's usually one of the kids that has to clean it out. Oh, that's gross. I don't like that. But this is a rich man's chamber pot. Let's go across the hallway into the parlor. Well, we have moved across the hallway into what would have been the parlor. Now, not normally, there would not have been a drafting table in the parlor, but we needed the wall space to show what a drafting table would have looked like. But after the folks had had their dinner there in the dining room, which we're using as a bedroom, but it was a dining room then, the men folks would have moved across the hallway into the parlor for their cigars and their brandy and would have solved all of the problems of the world. So while they were sitting in here, the ladies were still in the dining room, chatting, maybe doing hand sewing, and they would stay for several hours to visit because the people didn't get together like we do now. Also notice one of the characteristics about the house design from a man from Connecticut. You'll notice that the fireplace is in the center of the room and was built so that, they have a fire here, fire on the other side, so it's taking care of 2 rooms and only 1 chimney. And when we get outside, as I said earlier, you'll see that all the chimneys are on the outside wall of the houses built here in Texas. Now, let's move into the other bedroom. We're now in what would have been one of the bedrooms. We have to use it as a tool room so people can get up close and personal looking at the tools. One thing I like to bring out, especially when I'm doing a program for the children or the teenagers, is to ask 1 or 2 of them, well, y'all are of dating age. Are you dating now? And, maybe they'll say yes. And I said, well, let me tell you about something. In 1861, if a young man wanted to call on a young lady, he would have to ask the parents for permission to come by and visit with their daughter. And if they liked him, they would say yes. And when he got there, they would light what's called a courting candle. So the young man has arrived at the young lady's house, and he comes in, and, hellos are said, and they sit down in the parlor to visit. Well, the courting candle is lit. And the candle would have had a little notch for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. It would go up and down. The notches are here, If he was given 1 hour to visit with that young lady, he knew that when the candle burnt down to that notch, he had to leave. He didn't dare ask if he could stay longer. It was time for him to go. But what did they do for that hour? Well, they might have gone into the kitchen and made taffy, and they would have used the candy maker machine here, and there's 3 different molds that they could have used to have pressed out the taffy with different designs. We have all sorts of tools in here that would have been what they would have built houses with, barns with, what they would use to take care of their horses. And we thought it would be good to have a bale of cotton to show people how big a bale of cotton was. So some of the society members went to Burton, Texas, and bought it from that old cotton mill that is still standing. As you can see, it weighs 480 pounds. Well, here we are in the hallway, or dog trot, as they called it. And I wanted to tell you that I'm dressed in period dress of the 1860 time period. As the lady of the house, if I knew that I was going to be receiving guests today, I would have dressed like this. I have a jacket or a cape that I can put on if I had to go to town. I would put on my gloves, had my parasol, and taken the horse or carriage into town. I think you might have also noticed in the other rooms there was nothing that resembled a closet. They didn't build closets in houses of this time period. They were taxed by the tax assessor. So no closets. Armoires, chef robes, that sort of thing would have been used. In the 1930s, this area back here was built on. There were still members of the family, the Simonton family, living in the house at that time. And they needed more room because of all the children. And they also put a restroom in the house. Houses didn't have closets, kitchens, or restrooms. The kitchens were detached to keep the heat from being in the house or chance of fire. The restrooms, outhouses were outside. And like I said, the closets were taxed. So after the Simonton family gave the house to the Montgomery Historical Society, the house was used by the city of Montgomery for city offices. It was used by a group of lawyers at one time. It was even used by a church at one time while they were saving up their money to build their building. We use the room when we're open fully to the public for classroom projects. Historical groups will come and have their chapter meetings here. But right now we're not doing that. But let me show you a diorama that was created by a man by the name of James Armour. And for those of you that are old enough to remember the Armour Meat Company, he was from that family. And I had the privilege of meeting that man. He was elderly when I met him, and this just amazes me, the diorama that he built. I suppose he didn't build it, he created it. I can't even draw a stick figure and make it look like anybody. But this is what Montgomery looked like from the period of 1840 to 1940. And if you remember the house, the Magnolia house I told you about in that front room where Sam Houston would spend the night, that's this house right here. Hi, we're at the Hulon house now. Mr. and Mrs. Hulon built this house in 1857. They raised their 4 children in this house, and it was only 2 rooms. Well, in the beginning, it was only 2 rooms. But back then, all 4 of the boys could have slept in one room. That was not uncommon. It is a dog trot house, and again, they were boys. They might have moved their mattresses, center of the dog trot and slept there on those hot Texas nights. But if you'll notice that it appears that there's a room on either side, and then when we get inside, you'll see that they're on the back as well. They later enclosed those to make more bedrooms. And this room over here, as you see, has an outside door. If visitors were coming through and needed a place to stay, and the family didn't know them very well, they'd let them stay in that room. That way they had to come outside the room, go to the front door, knock on it to have entrance to the house. Now let's move inside. Well, you're standing on the original floors here in the Hulon house. It was also considered a showplace of 1857. Look how tall the ceilings are. And of course the shiplap, and you've heard about that on the HGTV show from Waco about shiplap. They would have opened those two doors, these two doors, let the breeze go through, the dining table would have been out here, they would have taken their meals, and as I said before, the children would have probably slept out here at night. Let's move into the dining room. And you remember me saying there were never closets in the house, and we have a chef robe, an armoire, whichever way you want to call it, over here in the corner where she would have put her finer dishes. Did you notice that there's little containers here on the floor that the legs of the table are, inside? And that was used to put water or kerosene in that to keep the little critters, bugs, roaches, ants, whatever, from climbing up on the table while people were having their dinner. This is a door going to that extra room that they eventually walled up to use as a bedroom. And whoever stayed in there had easy access to coming into the dining room. And again, remember I told you how in Texas all the fireplaces were built on the outside wall? And here we are.
Right.
Remember how I told you that there was never a kitchen inside? Well, when the Tharps bought this house and moved it out to their property off of the old Honey Egypt Road, they had to have a modern kitchen. So they took one of the rooms that had been used as a bedroom and made it into a modern kitchen. So come on in, let's see what's cooking. We have a modern pot-bellied stove here and here. There would have been an outside door going to the porch. They put in indoor plumbing so she could wash her dishes. No dishwasher. And I'm sure she didn't use the flour container that's there in the corner on a daily basis, but that's what that would have been used for. We're now in the parlor. One thing I wanted to bring out, notice the threshold, how tall it is. That was highly uncommon because men in that day were just not real tall men. But it's another showing of his wealth. He made them taller. You know, everything's bigger in Texas. And remember I said that Sam Houston really enjoyed coming to the city of Montgomery? Well, you'll notice there's a picture of him over the fireplace that's on the outside wall. And this being a rich man's house, he had a fancy chamber pot. Now this one doesn't have a leather cushion like the other house did, but again, the children, by the time they get over here to this house, they know what a chamber pot looks like, and so I will raise it for them and show them how fancy it is, and they still think it's gross that somebody has to clean it out. I explained to them that that is a sewing machine and that down at the bottom is called a treadle, and the ladies would have sat there and would have moved that back and forth with their feet to make the needle go up and down. Well, folks, we're now at the Crane Cabin. It was built in 1867, 2 years after the war between the states. Nicholas Crane was a Confederate soldier, and he survived the war, came home, picked up his wife, they went land shopping, and they found some land off of the Neches River in Angelina County. It was at Weaver's Bend. The land was real fertile, and he became a farmer. They already had one child at that point, and they had 3 other children, and all 4 of the children were raised in this house. It is considered a large cabin to be, you know, out on the prairie, although this was on the banks of the river. And but it is a true testament of his building skills, because just until last year we had to replace 6 logs on that side. So pretty good building. Watch your head when we go in. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. Let's go into the 1-room cabin and see how they would have lived. Notice the threshold, how short this is. As I said, men were just not real tall in the 1860s. Well, this is the Crane cabin. And yes, all 6 of the family lived in this house. Now you see these logs up here. It would have been floored up there. The children, all 4 of the children would have slept up there. Now here in the corner is a bed. It's not a true size that would have been, but the mom and dad would have slept downstairs. It would have been a little larger, but they used any of the trees that they had to cut down when they were making this you know, ready for the houses. They used to make furniture, or as in this case, this bed. Nicholas and Marianne Havard was her maiden name, were both from the state of Alabama. They moved to Texas, their families did, sometime in the 1850s. They met in Angelina County and married in 1857. As I said, he was in the war between the states from the state of Texas, and he did survive. Over on this wall where we had to replace the logs last year, you'll find a copy of the land grant, pictures of their headstones in Angelina County, and a copy of their marriage certificate that I was able to get from the county courthouse in Angelina County, Lufkin to be exact. But the most important fact that I love to tell people about this cabin, it's my family's cabin. So if you're ever in Lufkin or Diboll, Texas, don't talk about me because I'm related to all of the Havards. Mary Ann Havard and I were related. And also one of the neat things about it, my cousin Pearl, who died at 99 3/4 in Diboll, Texas, where this house was located. She and my mother used to play in this house when they were little kids with the grandchildren of Mary Ann and Nicholas, and that's just very dear to my heart. Cousin Pearl never lived more than 15 miles away from her birthplace in Angelina County, the Diboll area, and she was so proud to know that the house was brought here and was put back together for education and for people to tour to see how things were in the 1850s, 1860s. And Mary Ann and Nicholas did not pass away until the middle, 1912, 1913 time period. Well, folks, everyone that, during that time period had a blacksmith shop or a tool shop, a barn to keep all of their equipment in. This one has a forge. They would have made everything. I mean, you know, they couldn't just run down to Home Depot and get what they needed. Sometimes during the year when we have events going on, we'll have men here demonstrating how the tools were used and what they were used for. And with that being said, on September the 25th of this year, we are going to have the 10th anniversary of Fernland. And there's going to be events going on all day. It's going to be open to the public from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And there will be some folks out here demonstrating how these tools are used. Well, folks, this is the last house on the property for the Fernland Historical Park. It is also the oldest on property, built in 1830. We were still a republic of Texas. The testament to him on his building skills is just wonderful. I mean, because the house is still standing after all this time. It was, as I call it, a little house on the prairie. Let's go in and see how they would have lived during that time period. I must say, if Pa had been out hunting and he brought in his buffalo or his deer or whatever, he would have chopped it up on this chopping block. Well, this is how they would have lived in 1830. It was out on the prairie. Mr. Jourdain and his family had to defend themselves all the time from the Indians. And one of the unique factors about the house is that we can show the gun port. There's two of them in the house. This one, and then one behind this door. But he could sit here with his rifle through there and defend his property and his family. Now, the history passed down by the family is that he was killed by the Indians. Again, there's no kitchen, there's no closet. They would have prepared their food outside. They had the fireplace to keep things warm. And if you notice when we were walking up, there are no glass windows in this house. They're just wooden shutters. It did have an upstairs. The children would have slept upstairs. And I like to tell people, if you notice how steep and short these are, the steps are, it's identical to what you find at the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. It's really hard to climb up, but that's where the children would have slept. But they also had this nice open window here on this side of the house. I also asked everyone that comes in if they have any idea what this would have been. Now, she wouldn't have had it, not in 1830, but it's an apple peel. The children have a good time trying to figure out what this is. Well, folks, that was the last cabin, last dwelling here on the property, and as I said, it's the oldest. It's one of 5 in the state of Texas still standing. That's just remarkable. When I'm doing a first-person program, especially for the children, as I said, the 4th graders learn about Texas history. At that point, I'm standing on the steps of the cabin, and I'm looking this way, and I point out the fact that it says, "Oh, here comes Paul. He's got a buffalo coming after him." And they all turn around and look. But that was a bronze buffalo that was donated to Montgomery Park. There's a beautiful waterfall over there as well. Well, folks, this is the last thing that I'm going to show you here at the Historical Park. This stump, a redwood, came from California. The Tharps traveled a lot. They purchased this quite some time ago. It's estimated, with us counting the little rings, 858 years old. And it amazes me that it's not petrified, but it's old. Quite a conversation piece. It was my pleasure to be able to bring this virtual tour for you for the library system, and I hope that a lot of folks get to see it and they learn from the things that I've said today. But better yet, if you come in person, there's always more to the story. Thank you.